the road, and this is a good distance from where the construction of a retaining wall was supposed to be taking place. All right, so look at this, look at the height of this. They have even gone ahead and put these blocks there. So this is far.
Now we are at a critical, disastrous state right now in the Clozier project. And weeks ago, I had spoken about temporary shoring on projects like those. No one heeded the advice, and here we are, the deadly consequences we having right now. Even as recent as a week ago, I made another video talking about how we should have temporarily shored immediately, so that the situation would not have worsened. No one heeded the advice. And again, here we are today. We have separations and settlements of more than 3 to 5 feet at this stage, especially on the upper slope. So this is the most critical it's going to get. And it's quite possible that that upper slope where the house is perched on may collapse. Now I see no one is heeding the advice to stay away from that area. That is a very dangerous area. The soils in that area could suddenly fail. And especially I am extremely concerned about the guys working in the bottom of that slope where the house is perched on. If that slopes fail, there is nothing on God's earth that you guys can do to save these workmen. I am telling you, it's extremely dangerous. A matter of fact, nobody should be actually traversing that area. You guys are playing with fire. I am telling you, you guys are playing with fire. I am appealing and asking that better judgment prevail in this situation and avoid people getting hurt. If the advice was heeded over a week ago when I said temporarily, immediately show the area, then a lot of it could have been salvaged. At this stage, the only parts that can really be salvaged is the roadway parts and not the upper roadway where the house is perched. That area is pretty much a goner. It's going to be very difficult to go and actually temporarily support the upper slope area. You can salvage the roadway area and you can temporarily support that. At this stage, it's quite obvious that no one heeds any advice. And what we have to understand, that this disaster represents systematic failure. And again, I don't want to spend too much time harping on who's responsible and the blame game, because at this stage it's just counterproductive. Right now, all that I recommend is that no one should be traversing that area. I am telling you that it's deadly, deadly dangerous. And if you also care about the safety of the people working on the site, okay, there should be no one working under that house. Okay, there should be no one working under that slope where the house is. That is even more deadly dangerous. But for going forward and actually for future projects, let this be a learning experience. Capital projects of this nature should have a lot of checks and balances for very good reasons, for safety, as we can see what just happened. That is why these things are set up where you have checks and balances from the beginning. You have checks and balances on the design, which is checked by the Ministry of Infrastructure. Then you have supervision on the contractors, which is actually done by the Ministry of Infrastructure. And then you have a system of RFIs, which is requests for information by the contractors, where if the contractor does not understand something that is actually on the design documents or the contract documents, then guess what? They talk to the engineers on site to explain it. So, as we said, system failure. So forget about that. I understand the push to try to get as much as possible contractors locally to do this sort of project, but they have to be proficient at doing it, because they may seem uncomplicated, but they could become very complicated. So take a look at this schematic that I've created. So hopefully we all can learn something from this experience. One of the most important things that was not done during the building of this retaining wall is the temporary shoring of the roadway and embankment. What we're going to do right now is show you a little schematic of the existing condition before the start of construction, and we're going to go all the way to what would have been the proposed final condition after construction. And we're going to show you exactly what was not done in between those stages. Particularly, one of the most important things that needed to be done is the temporary shoring of the roadway and embankment, and especially seeing that vehicles were allowed to pass through the area during construction. Now, all of this could have been done if the roadway and embankment was properly shored. So let's take a look at the schematic to explain all of this much more clearly. Okay, so what we're looking at right here is the existing condition before the start of construction. So there you see the upper slope, the existing roadway, and the soil mass under the roadway. As you can see, at the edge of the soil under the roadway, there is no support. So you can see that vertical line of unsupported soil mass. And hence the reason why they were trying to build a retaining wall to support the soil under the roadway. And that is all well and good. It would have been a long-term fix. The problem is after construction was started and the soil was exposed and excavation done, then the soil became more vulnerable. And with the passing of additional traffic and nothing to hold the soil in place, then obviously the soil will fail. So let's take a look at another schematic that explains the failure of the soil without any temporary support during construction. Okay, so what we have here is a roadway soil embankment collapse during construction while the retaining wall is being built. And this happened because the soil was not supported. The current retaining wall that is being built is built a little distance away from the soil mass, so it doesn't provide immediate support. Of course, when it's built and it's backfill, then it would provide support for the soil. But in the meantime, because the soil was disturbed and there was excavation, there is nothing holding the soil in place while vehicles are passing by. So as you can see from the schematic, as it says, that vertical line of unsupported soil mass, not temporarily supported during construction, hence it must fail. There's nothing to hold it in place. And while vehicles are passing by and there's nothing to hold the soil in place, it definitely will fail. As you can see from the notes on the schematic where it says, needed to be supported by sheet piling or soldier pile and lagging wall, and if it was, would have enabled traffic to safely pass over the roadway without causing soil failure. But obviously, as we can tell, none of that was done. As a result, the soil fails along a 45-degree failure plane. As you can see in some of the videos that we have seen circulating on social media. Okay, so now let us take a look at what should have been done in terms of temporary support for the roadway and soil embankment. As you can see in this schematic, there is the roadway and the soil embankment supported by sheet piling or soldier pile system, while the retaining wall, which is a little away from the soil embankment, is being built. So the good thing about that, when the soil is supported, is that you don't have to worry too much about soil failing and distracting and disturbing the actual construction of the retaining wall. It actually keeps the soil in place steady and prevents failure, and also prevents any material failing and ending up in the actual work area of the retaining wall that is being built. So now, as you can see, based on that sheet piling system, that the vertical line of soil mass is now temporarily safely supported during construction by, as we say, either sheet piling or soldier pile and lagging wall. Now, traffic could have safely passed during construction without causing soil failure, because the soil would have been kept in place by that temporary shoring system. So again, the temporary shoring keeps the soil in place and ensures there is no soil failure. Okay, so let's take a look now at the final condition where the retaining wall is built, it's backfill, and the new roadway is in place. Everything is safely done as should have been done. Okay, so this is exactly what the contractors were trying to achieve. So this is a schematic of your proposed retaining wall safely built after construction and backfill and then your new roadway. And of course, then vehicles would have been able to pass, no problems. Your retaining wall built, if it was designed and built properly, would have kept all the soil in place, would have kept the new roadway in place. And by now, hopefully, you'd have been driving through Clozier without a problem. But unfortunately, as we've seen in the previous schematics, the temporary shoring was not done. So at this stage, it is actually counterproductive to try to apportion blame to one party or the other. The main thing is to learn from the experience and going forward, try not to make the same mistakes. So again, let me reiterate. There may have been springs, there may have been high water table, but none of that would have caused a collapse of the roadway and roadway embankment had the roadway and the roadway embankment been shored. And all more for a reason, because there's waterlogged soil, all more for a reason why there should have been temporary shoring. And if there wasn't temporary shoring, definitely vehicles passing by should have been discouraged. And of course, during the construction, there should have been no vehicles passing by on the compromised roadway. It only added to the problem and caused a quicker failure of the soil. So there you have it with the final condition, a new proposed roadway built, a backfill behind the retaining wall that would have been built, and a new proposed retaining wall that would have safely held the soil in place and the roadway in place. So the lessons learned, it was obviously a systematic failure. There was obviously not enough check and balances. Capital projects of that nature require checks and balances, where one person checks the other person and another person checks the other person. So that way, if somebody misses something, then somebody else will catch it. So from a design perspective, more than likely, there was no call on the contract documents or the design documents or the drawings calling for temporary shoring. Or if it was on the drawings and it wasn't done, then obviously you know whose responsibility that was. And if that wasn't done by the people who are actually doing the construction, then there should have been supervision, which should have called and said, wait, we need to temporarily support this structure. But obviously that also wasn't done. So again, without worrying about the blame game, there was total system failure.